it's very freeing when you are no longer wearing the mask, if you will. Like,
Yeah.
you'll hear people especially talk in the ADHD and ADHD and autism community about wearing a mask and why that is such a draining task. Why you can have been at work all day and it feel like you have been moving nonstop yet have accomplished nothing. And what it is you're putting on a performance the majority of the day so that you can fit in the work environment. And when you finally learn to take that mask off and just be who you are, and people around you, they deal with it or they don't, but it's not affecting who you are.
Welcome to the Day in the Life series on the Accessible Community podcast, where we will be exploring disability and accessibility in everyday life. Each podcast episode is a new lens to broaden our understanding and drive inclusion. For show notes, go to accessiblecommunity.org/podcasts. Let's make accessibility part of every day. Welcome in, everyone, to another episode of Day in Life, a podcast series where we put a spotlight on different disabilities in order to better understand them and raise awareness. And so we've been focusing on a few different disabilities, including autism and blindness. But now we're going to be talking about ADHD, which I am really excited for because I feel like it's one of the more widely known disabilities, but I feel like in that way it's also very, very widely misunderstood. So I'm really excited to kind of showcase different individuals living day to day with ADHD. And so before I turn it over to my first guest for ADHD, I'm going to give a quick introduction for myself. I'm your host for this series, Taylor Dorward, and I am a blind individual. I am a Caucasian male with short brown hair, blue eyes, and a short brown stubbly beard. And today, I think I'm wearing like a light red shirt with a oddly patterned shacket over top, which is a shirt jacket combo. It's a new discovery of mine, but they're super comfy and I'm loving it so far. So with that, I will pass it over to my guest, Kat, and let her introduce herself to everyone.
Hello, thank you for having me. My name's Cat Schneider. I am nobody. No, I kid. I'm Microsoft MVP. I've been in this tech community space for probably around 4 or 5 years now. I started out in state government in state of Florida, did a bunch of accessibility stuff, came into the tech world, and yeah, I love accessibility, and I'm late diagnosed ADHD, we'll say. I was one of those kids that was really gifted in school, always did really, really well. But underneath, I struggled a lot. And it wasn't until I was in almost turning 30 that I was diagnosed with ADHD because we realized it was a very problematic, persistent, and involved issue that I was having with trying to get work done and trying to focus. So I guess I'll give a little description about myself. I'm in a darker room with color changing lights. Uh, Female, mid brown hair, half up, half down, with a purple sweatshirt on. Um, yeah, yeah,
Nice.
tech and
Thank you.
ADHD.
Thank you for that. So, what I find really interesting about that is you talking about going through the diagnosis process, and I'm sure you're well aware. I know a lot of people who are self-proclaimed ADHD and they'll say like undiagnosed.
hmm
For anyone who is in that area of undiagnosed, what advice do you have? Is there any benefit to going through that process? What was that like? And just what are your overall thoughts on that?
So for me, I think just getting that diagnosis, not necessarily getting a label, but having some language to wrap around what was going on with myself, um, it was very eye-opening and I'm gonna try and say this without crying. Um, Very freeing. We'll put that like that. It was basically it was a way to for me to then say I'm no longer a garbage human being. This is just how my brain works. Because I went through life going, why is this so hard? Shouldn't be this hard. This is also one of the things that gets me when you start to have conversations about this in the late diagnosis. I went through I was really great in school. Straight A's for the most part until I got to college. And then I realized, oh, hey, there are actually skills that you should have learned while you were in school on how to study and how to do research and how to, take information that you got in the classroom and then apply it to the information that you need to do outside of the classroom. So it was a struggle for me. And while I have the diagnosis ADHD, there are other diagnoses that I've not received. So I've always kind of struggled with numbers and writing and whatnot. So like there's this thought in the back of my mind that I might also have uh what is it, dysgraphia or not dyscalculia, but basically in my head when people are like, "Oh, do you remember this or do you remember that?" and I'm like, "I can't picture it." When I say I can't picture it, it's very specifically because I cannot picture it. Where some people, you say apple and they just understand the term apple, or they might see the shape of an apple, or they might see a shape of a red apple, or, there's varying degrees in which somebody kind of puts things or displays things in their mind, if you will. So some people have internal monologues, some people don't. Like myself, I may have multiple different versions of my voice going on in my head at any one point in time. I will argue with myself inside my head. I have full-on conversations to the point that sometimes I have to start having them out loud because the noise is just too much in my head. When it comes to remembering things, I'm one of those people that I like my memories are stored using pretty much all of my senses. And so I'm very great at remembering faces, not necessarily people's names. And so whenever I see somebody and I'm like, oh my God, I know this person, like I know their face, and it bugs me until I can remember where I know their face from. And so there was a woman that I had met just randomly out in town one day and she just, hey, and I was like, hi, I I know you, but where did I, and it bothered me for weeks until I was able to recreate the entire scene in which I remembered meeting her. So it was like I could see her face, but then I needed to see more and like started to see the background and the color and started to understand the sounds that were happening and what she was wearing and the setting. And so when I finally was able to do it, I was like, oh my God, that's where I know her. And so like my memories, they're built up on multiple layers. And so whenever it comes to like writing or trying to transpose or whatever numbers from one place to another, there are times where if I say it out loud, I'll get it mixed up. But when I go to put it in or enter it, it's in right. So it's like the lines get crossed somewhere. The information's there. It's right, but somewhere along the line, something happened in the translation from my brain to my mouth didn't work out. So, like, my brain is a fun little situation all on its own. And I don't know if you've seen memes out there where people are like, oh, when a neurotypical person asks a question or gets asked a question, and it's like a picture of a straight highway, you can see straight down it. There are, there's nothing on the road. But when an ADHD person gets asked a question, and now it's one of those insane interchanges where there's loops going around, everything is happening like that's my brain. There are 17 tabs open. One of them's playing music. I can't figure out what's happening and I don't know where I'm trying to go. But I will eventually get there.
I love that explanation. And a lot of disabilities can be challenging to understand, and ADHD is certainly one of them because it's a vast spectrum and people react to things in different ways and similar to blindness. But that's part of the reason I'm really enjoying this because no matter what disability someone has, I found there are so many similarities.
Hmm.
Like you were saying, like having trouble recognizing people, and obviously, as a person with blindness, I have trouble with that as well, but for a little different reasons. So it's interesting hearing similar struggles, but for different reasons, and just kind of sharing that kind of camaraderie type feeling.
Yeah,
It's cool.
yeah, yeah. Which reminds me, you asked me how I got the diagnosis. So yeah, one of the things that, or the reasons that I got diagnosed is I was struggling at work to the point that I got put on a PIP, which is a professional improvement plan, because I was not doing well. People with ADHD tend to have time blindness, where time is not a construct that we understand. We get what time is, but we don't experience time in the same way that neurotypical people experience time. So something that I feel only took 30 minutes could very easily have been 4.5, 5 hours. When I am in hyper focus mode, when I am like into it, you cannot extract me out of it. And time does not exist for me. It's just a matter of I must do this. This must get done. It's going to happen or I will die. And so that ended up being a problem where I would constantly get asked, hey, where's this project? How much longer? And I have time optimism because I also have time blindness. And time optimism is where you believe you have more time or that you can accomplish something in less time than is actually required. Because we tend to be somewhat optimistic in the way that we see time. And somebody's like, oh, can you do this? Heck yeah, I can do that. I can do that in an hour if all things go right, if I don't come up against a bug, if somebody doesn't interrupt me, and now I have to switch between what I was doing and what they need. So there's a lot of extra or extraneous factors that go into it, and me getting the diagnosis was because I consistently was like, oh yeah, it can totally be done in this amount of time, and it couldn't because I never could see all of the other extra things that were going on or that could potentially happen that would require me to have or need more time to complete. So I ended up going through my EAP at work and I basically sobbed to them on the phone for 3.5 hours. And they're like, have you ever been diagnosed ADHD? And I was like, absolutely not. No, my brother was ADHD. I'm not ADHD. And they're like, well, this and that and the other and this thing and this other. And I'm like, oh, that's ADHD. It's not just you're loud and obnoxious and you're doing whatever you can in order to get the attention that you need and like what? Like a million thoughts racing through my mind at the same time is not normal. And that as soon as somebody says something, I immediately start thinking of 1,000 other different things that we could do in order to fix a problem. And I will complete your sentences because you're not talking fast enough. Like, that's not normal. So it was eye-opening. And then I went through several stages of grief when I finally got that diagnosis because I struggled for so long. People who are like, oh, I've not been diagnosed, but I have ADHD, I don't discount them because I went for so long and I just thought I was a garbage human being because I couldn't do what everybody else could. But I'm completely capable of doing all of the things that everybody else could. I struggled. And it was like, well, maybe life is on hard mode for me and this is just the way things are supposed to be. And it's not. It's not supposed to be that way. I don't have issue with people claiming that they have ADHD. What I have issue with is there people who claim it that have not put any effort into researching and understanding what it is to have ADHD and why people are diagnosed ADHD. If you've spent the last 3 years going, what is wrong with me? And I've gone on this blog and I've been on this Reddit and I've been on this Twitter string and this Blue Sky group and everything out there seems like this is what I have, but I can't get a doctor to diagnose me. Well, if you're female, I completely understand that because ADHD was for the longest time only something that male boys had. Like young males could have ADHD. Nobody else could possibly have ADHD, especially women. It's one of these things that if you are female, not only do you struggle with other areas of diagnosis, but mental health diagnosis is just it's one of the areas that we need more research and more support. So,
Yeah, I fully agree with that. And thank you for how well you put all of that. And that's why I love having these conversations, hearing directly from people like you can describe what it's like for you. Because if we like read medical definitions and like articles, it might be harder to comprehend fully. And so hearing you talk about things like time blindness and time optimism, those sound they're a lot easier to grasp than these like long convoluted articles on ADHD. So thank you for
mhm.
that.
Yeah,
And
I will say finding a community, especially like the ADHD and ADHD communities on Twitter, on Blue Sky, and I'm going to call it Twitter because it's not X. Even though they may have gone through the process of calling it X, it's Twitter to me still. But Blue Sky especially is really, really great as far as finding communities specifically surrounding ADHD and ADHD and autism and whatnot. And so just going out there and interacting with individuals that are part of that community, it gives so much more insight. And like when you start to see the memes and you're like, wait, why does this resonate so much with me? Like, this is so funny, but it's so true. And then you're like, you start to think about it and you're like, wait a second, maybe, maybe I do. And like, you start to go down that rabbit hole, especially if you have ADHD. You're like, oh, here's a new thing for me to go dopamine seek and try and find out more information. And so a lot of the times, the things that you do in order to try and figure out what's going on with you if you just told a psychologist or psychiatrist that was what's going on, they'd be like, "Yep, nope, that sounds accurate. ADHD right there." Like, you have 30,000 hobbies and none of them are complete. I
well,
had the dopamine jump.
that's a great point. I always love talking about that, especially during these interviews, like the importance of having community and that because there's a lot of like depending on who it is. Like for me, I'm not really a part of any blind centric community groups, but I'm in groups where people share the same mindset of supporting others and things like accessibility and DEI topics.
It's very nice when you find a community, especially like you don't even have to, like you said, interact with the community. I, for the longest time, would just lurk, especially in the Microsoft communities. I'm like, oh, hey, that's brilliant. Oh, I like that. That's pretty cool. I should keep that. And then every now and again, you're going to find something and you're like, ooh, I feel like I've got something to say about that. And that's usually like the jumping off point for you into the community because then people are like, oh, hey, this person has, a point of view that is interesting or they've got something really interesting to say, we should start interacting with them, and that's where you start to get more and more involved in the communities. But I mean, you don't ever have to interact. Just having a community there that you can be on the outskirts of and you can watch and observe and take information in from is sometimes just the thing that you need. Like it's just enough of support for you to deal with the everyday. So
Yeah, and I like your strategy with kind of lurking and then kind of easing your way into it. And I think that highlights a great thing. Like disability, yeah, you can think of it in the negative way, but you can also think of it as you, because of your disability and my disability and what whoever it is, because of our situation, we have a very unique perspective. And so
yeah,
you
and
had mentioned the Microsoft community. So can you
yeah.
tell us a little bit more about what that is to you and what kind of stuff you do there?
So while I was working for the state of Florida, I ended up in mentoring program within the organization that I was working at. And through the mentoring program, I had some really great mentors and I got to meet a lot of really great people. But one of the mentors that I ended up with was the CIO of the organization. And the very first meeting that I had with him, where we were just getting to know each other, and he's trying to figure out what he can help me with, and I'm trying to figure out, who he is as a person. He'd ask me, what is it that I'm working on right now? Now, granted, I work in organizational development at this point, and I'm part of a group where we are running the internship program and the QA/QC program and the employee survey and all of the policies and procedures and forms and training. Like we're sort of like HR adjacent, but we're in the business area. We're not in IT, so it's not anything that I was, oh, I'm now talking to the CIO because I'm in IT and this is how I get mentored. It was just data and technology has always just kind of been something that I've always been intrigued by. And so talking with the mentoring program chair person running the mentoring program, they ended up matching me up with the CIO. And he's like, so what is it that you're hoping to get out of this mentorship program? And I was like, anything and everything. Like it's really cool to have this kind of insight from this point of view of the organization. And he was like, well, what are you working on right now? And I was like, well, actually, just before I got on the call with you, I was watching a LinkedIn Learning video on Power BI because somebody had mentioned Power BI as something that we were looking at as an organization. And he's like, well, really? Well, we I have an extra Power BI Pro license if you're interested in it. And I was like, yes, please. And then we spent the next month, like I think it was like 30-minute calls once a week, where I just got to pick his brain with all of the things that I had been learning about Power BI in the last week. And because I was in charge of the employee survey data, which we had just completed at the beginning of the year, and now we're in the middle of the year, this is also during COVID. So we're all, you know, working from home and whatnot. He was like, oh, this is incredible. Like I'd done all of the employee survey data in a Power BI report. And he's like, I would love to get my hands on this. However, would you be interested in presenting this to our statewide OIT group? Like all of the people across the state for the department, just who are working in IT. And I was like, sure, but as long as they know that I'm just poking around with this, I'm just messing with it. I'm no expert by any means. I'm just seeing what I can do with this. And he's like, absolutely. So then a month later, I've got a 30-minute presentation on this call showing off this dashboard that I created with Power BI for all the employee survey data, showing them how it's interactive. You can click on it, and then all of a sudden, the entire dashboard like then reshuffles around and shows new data and how you can drill down into the data. And everybody kind of lost their minds. They were like, "Oh my God, this is incredible!" And so within a couple of months, we had started up an internal community of practice specifically for Power BI. It was being chaired by IT and it was for business users. And so we were learning all together how to use Power BI. Now, granted, we're all in the same department. So when we have questions, we have people who kind of understand the data that we're working with or understand what we're trying to accomplish because we have very similar goals. And so it's a lot easier to be like, hey, have you ever like thought about how to do this? Or have you tried to do anything with this? And so there were a lot of times where it was like going to Stack Overflow, but internally, and I didn't have to sanitize all of the information in order to be able to ask the question. So it was nice that we had a community internally where I could start to understand these technologies. And then because of that mentoring relationship with CIO, I was able to start kind of pushing a little more and networking with more people across IT. And I eventually was able to get them to expand the community of practice to incorporate all of the Power Platform and SharePoint and data sources and whatnot. And so we had a larger community of practice that more and more people got involved in. So it started out at 10 people, and a year and a half later, when I was getting ready to leave the department, we were at over 300 people in this community of practice and an organization of, I think it was like 5,000 that were regularly interacting in some way, form, or fashion with this community, asking questions, presenting on monthly calls, participating in one way, shape, or form. And it's just like I enjoyed, like very much enjoyed building that community, being a part of building that community. So much so that a lot of what I've done since I left the agency has been, how do you help other organizations build a community? So like I've done some Kickstarter projects with Microsoft where I'm helping an organization build like the starting blocks of their own internal communities related to the Power Platform. And so I have enjoyed greatly like helping others build a community. I've enjoyed building like my own community as part of the organizers or co-organizers for the Power Platform UX UI allies or accessibility group, where we had you on there one time to show off what you were doing with Power Apps, which was an incredible session. Still loved that session.
Totally
Um,
forgot about that until now, but yeah, that was fun.
yeah. But like, so we've had so many people come on there to show off what they were doing regarding accessibility or regarding UX and UI and how they were incorporating that practice into what they were building with the Power Platform or within Microsoft ecosystem. And so I've thoroughly enjoyed just the practice of building and being a part of communities. And so it's nice. It feeds the dopamine I need in my brain.
Nice. So quickly, could you share to any listeners who are unfamiliar with in that industry what exactly the Power Platform is?
So the Power Platform has been for the longest time considered a low code or no code way of development. So typically your developers were building in JavaScript and C Sharp and oh, what else is there? HTML, CSS, and all of the other fancy languages that I can't exactly think of right now. And it's kind of been like this thing that exists, but it costs a lot of money in order to do development, and it's just kind of been outside the hands of anybody working in a business area. And what I loved about it was, as somebody who's on the business side, who enjoys technology, but never went to school for technology. Like I went to school for biology and I went to school for studio art, neither of which was computer engineering or computer technology or AI or any of that. I went to school to learn taxonomy and learn how to make things from nothing. That is just, that's not your typical roadmap into technology. So I'm a business user and I've now found this Power Platform, this Power Apps, which is for applications, and this Power Automate, which is for workflows, and Power BI, which is for data. And now all of a sudden I can start to create things where before I was using Excel and I taught myself VBA macros in Excel and basically Visual Basic for anything on the Microsoft ecosystem. So Excel, Word, PowerPoint, Access, you name it. If I was able to build a macro, I was figuring out how to do it. And then Power Platform came along, and now I could do this on the internet. I didn't have to have a connection directly into a database that was required, and or like I needed to have VPN access. Like if my internet or if my data was available on SharePoint, my data was available in an Excel document, I could now access it, and I could now make a form or set up a workflow where I could reduce the amount of friction to get from the point that I start to the point that I need to end. And so if I needed to collect a bunch of information from people and I needed to collect it in a certain way, I could generate a form in Power Apps, and then I could collect that information and I could send it right back out in Power BI, or I could use Power Automate to set up another thing that needed to be done. And so because I was in the business area, I understood the business processes, I understood my data, but now I didn't have to go to IT and say, hey, I need a app, or I need a workflow, or I need a report in order to be built so that I can do my job, and wait 6 months to find out if they're even going to have people and money to do that. And when they say no because the project's too small, well, now I'm just SOL and good luck. Whereas Power Platform let me do that. I didn't have to wait on IT. I didn't have to sit around and wonder if I'm going to be able to do my job or not. I can just do it. I can build the application, and it doesn't require a developer's know-how to do it. It helps if you understand some of the concepts, but you don't have to know it. And now that we've got Copilot out there and we've got all these AI tools, and Microsoft is just shoving AI as far as they can into everything that they're putting out, it makes it a lot easier to do. And it makes it a heck of a lot easier to go from zero to a finished product. So I just, yeah,
Yeah,
that
I've
gap
always
is
yeah.
really shrinking
Yeah,
between business and
absolutely.
IT.
And that's one of the biggest things I've loved about the Power Platform. And now with Microsoft Copilot integrating more and more AI into these products, it's making these skills and jobs more attainable for someone like me who, prior to developing apps using Microsoft Power Apps, I had no coding experience. I got to college like similar to what you were saying. I did well in high school and middle school and all the way up. And then I just got to college, and then it was like a sensory overload and realized I didn't have the skills and I didn't develop them enough to what I was going to be experiencing in college. And so I didn't think that was a possibility for me, but from the Power Platform and AI, it makes all those skills and jobs more attainable for
Yeah,
people like me or really anyone.
yeah, for sure. Really,
And so
I
that's
absolutely
uh,
love it for that
yeah,
reason.
yeah. But that's a good transition into one of my favorite topics, and I actually heard you speak about it recently, and I'm excited to talk about it again.
Hmm.
How AI in overlaps with accessibility, and what are your thoughts on that, and how it can be used, maybe some of the pros and cons. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was gonna say her jobs. No. No, like any tool that comes out and any technology and anything that takes an area and takes it to the next level, you're going to have people who are very much, no, we can't do it that way. It's not the traditional way. We can't have it done that way. And then you're going to have people who are like, let's go, let's run, like we're going to go wild with this. And this is something I experienced while I was in studio art at Florida State is you have people who are purists who are like, no, you can't do ceramics if you're using technology. That's not ceramics. And I'm going, well, you can choose not to use technology, but I can choose to use technology and use the same exact concepts and same exact tools that you're using, and then add more tools to my tool set and be able to make and take this art form and expand upon it. And I can do other things. Just because I can do it this way doesn't mean it's the best way, doesn't mean it's the right way, doesn't mean it's the only way. There are things that help make what you're doing easier. And I take that and say with AI, it is another tool in the tool belt. Doesn't mean it's right, Doesn't mean it's perfect, doesn't mean it's going to do the job every single time, but it helps a lot in a lot of areas. It's not going to be perfect for all time. It's not going to be able to replace everybody. And it's probably going to put some people out of jobs. But that doesn't mean that those people are not employable. It just means if you want to continue, figure out how to use AI. It's not going away.
Yeah.
Like, the only way it's going away is if we end up in an apocalypse and there's something that takes the internet down. Like,
And then it might be nothing but AI.
yes. Like, it's going to be really hard to get away from AI at this point. The way it is just being shoved everywhere into everything and all things. And so instead of trying to fight it, I'm more about, well, let's embrace it where it makes sense. And where that comes in handy, especially with people with disabilities, is figuring out ways in which we can use the technology to help us or help others communicate, to help us do the things that we're trying to do that are expected of us that we otherwise couldn't do before or that we struggled with before. And so it just kind of it changes the starting line for us. Like there are people that they like to talk about how privilege is like everybody starts at the same line, but if you're, you know, female versus male, you start a little bit further back from the starting line than the male does. Or if you're African American, you start a little bit further back. Or if you're disabled, you start a little further back. And so as you start to incorporate the number of areas in which like you have not necessarily less of privilege, but you have something working against you. You start a little bit further back and a little bit further back and a little bit further back. And so you're looking at the starting line 100 yards up, but yet then you've got people that are on the starting line. They're like, sucks to be you. And yeah, I might be able to be fast and get to where you are and get to the finish line at the same time. But I still had to make up that whole area. And so it's the same with disabilities. You know, the starting line might be here, and neurotypical people, they're right there on the starting line. They don't have to deal with the same struggles that we do. But like for yourself with blindness, you're starting a little further back because you can't necessarily see the starting line or see where you're trying to go. And I'm starting a little bit further back from the starting line because I can't focus and I might end up somewhere else down the line. I might eventually make it to the finish line, but you know, like I'm not starting right there on the starting line. And so AI is just a way to help us get a little bit closer to that starting line. It's giving us the ability to have some sort of equality. We're not going to get there. It's not always going to put us right there on the starting line, but it can help. And having something that can help is going to be fantastic. And I don't see why anybody would shun something that is otherwise going to help them.
Yeah, I love the way you put that. And it's something I talk about every now and then because I'll hear sometimes that, like, if someone gets like a workplace accommodation or whatever it may be, there's a bit of a misconception that accessibility is like to give those an unfair advantage, but it's
Hmm.
really just taking someone who, like you would say, is neurotypical here, someone like me might be starting down here, but those accommodations can just kind of level that playing field a little bit. And so
Yeah.
I like the way you put that. That was very helpful to visualize, for, especially for
Yeah.
people who are newer to this. So thank you
Yeah.
for
And
that.
and that's one of the things that I love about my ADHD brain is it helps me to, you know, recontextualize something for others that maybe that it was hard for them to understand. It's like, oh, well, this concept that's really hard for you, what if we break it down into these other abstract concepts and spit it out into something you do understand? That's just the way my brain works. That's how I ended up explaining SharePoint to some folks who had no idea they just thought a SharePoint was a site. This is just a website that you went to, you typed it in, and that's SharePoint. And I'm like, all right, hold on.
That's part
Let's
of it.
consider for a second. Now, I live in
Yeah.
Florida. We are surrounded by beaches. Anywhere you go in the state of Florida, you are within 60 miles of salt water. Doesn't matter where you go. So it was something that the people I was trying to explain why we needed to migrate from an on-prem or something that was like locked down into an online or cloud version of SharePoint, they didn't understand why I was asking the things that I was asking or what I was asking for. And so I was like, all right, let's break this down. Consider your SharePoint site to be a beach bag, and consider that in your beach bag you have a cooler or you have a bucket. And so like I started to associate various pieces and parts of what a SharePoint site consists of to those items. And once I started to do that, then they could start to understand, oh, so this whole site collection is my beach bag, and this bucket is my list, and this cooler is my library. And we need to take all of this because right now it's locked inside my car, but I need to get it so that I'm able to use it on the beach. And so this is what we're trying to do. Like that was the light bulb moment for them. And so that's one of the benefits of the way that my brain works, is I can rapidly think of that abstraction and then turn it around so people are able to better understand. And yeah, it it's a disability, but it does have its upsides.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I'll hear them sometimes framed as disability superpowers, which
Mhm.
is, especially for me with blindness, like I think of like Daredevil and like stuff like that.
Yeah,
So I always find that kind of concept a little humorous, but also just nice that people kind of reframe their
yeah,
situation, their disability as having an upside to it. It's not always going to be like that. There are going to be days where you're like, oh, I hate, like, there are plenty of days where I'm like, I hate that I can't see that. I hate that I can't play certain games with my knees, hate that I can't use this product, but there are so many other situations where it enhances it for whatever reason. So I like to focus on that, the joy of it, and
hmm,
encouraging others to do the same. Because you can go down a rabbit hole of despair if you focus
yeah,
on that too much.
yeah. And I'm very much, I like to be a positive person, and so I like to be able to find that silver lining, if you will. Like there are people out there who are like, no, you cannot say that ADHD is superpower. Like, yeah, how dare you? And it's like, I mean, do do we really need to just be so like, do we need to gatekeep people's happiness here? Like, just let people find joy and happiness where they can find joy and happiness. If it's not hurting anybody, like, what's the big deal?
Yeah.
So,
And I know you had said earlier, and I thought it was kind of funny. You had said you had all these hobbies and you never finish them. So I'm curious, what are some of those hobbies like? What are some of the things you're most passionate about?
well, at one point in time, while I was in school for art, I got into chainmail. So
Nice.
I'm very much a chainmail artist, where I also enjoy combining chainmail and ceramics. But I'm very into like science and tinkering and puzzling and whatnot. And so while I was in school studying ceramics, I got into like the side of ceramics that studies chemistry and the various physics of the way ceramics works and work heat and the way that, clay body interacts with the glaze and what happens. And so I've done like a lot of experiments and ended up finding one of the things that I really enjoyed was a clear matte glaze that I was told by everybody and anybody who is in the ceramics world that is 100% not possible. And I was like, damn it, it's gotta be. Like, it's gotta be. And basically the reasoning for why you can't have a clear matte glaze is because in order to make a glaze matte, it has to have air bubbles. And if you have air bubbles, it can't be clear. Well, last time I checked, air is usually clear. Um, in certain parts of the world, maybe not, but the air is usually clear. And so I was able to find many multiple versions of a clear matte glaze. And I was just over the world because I was like, oh my God, it fits. Like it does what it's supposed to do and it fits the clay body. And like, this is incredible. And so like, that's one thing. But pretty much I'm very much an artistic person. My office is very, very colorful. I like one of the things that I need for my ADHD. There's a lot of toys in my office. Like I've got Yoda and like baby, what is it, Grogu bobblehead, and I've got some Lego, and I've got some uh game character Funko Pops, and like I've got lights in my office that are changing, and my microphone that's got lights that change, and there's a lot of lights in my office, and that is just something that I call an anchor for my ADHD, because the long held myth that we only use 10% of our brains is complete. We definitely use our brains, but there are some tasks that you don't need to use the entirety of your brain for in order to accomplish. And then there's some tasks that you are using just about every last functioning brain cell in your head in order to do something. And so for myself and my ADHD, I cannot work in an office with overhead lights. The actually hearing the lights, because I can hear the electricity moving through the lights, which is another thing that people with ADHD seem to also have, is the ability to hear electricity. Didn't know that was a thing that others couldn't do. But hearing fluorescent lights or having lights that are coming down versus up facing lights, there's a lot that goes on. And so having all of these lights in my office, including my keyboard that lights up, it's just information that my brain can anchor onto to help it try to focus. And so people are like, oh, we'll just work with music. Well, there are days where the task is not that mentally taxing, that 100% yes, I can work with music. There are other days, everybody shut up, don't even breathe. I cannot listen to a single sound. Otherwise, I'll be distracted and I won't be able to focus on what I'm trying to do. So it's all over the place, but for me, like lights. I need colorful lights. I need that visual information to occupy some sort of my, like some part of my brain so that I can focus on what I need to actually focus on. For the love of God, I cannot work in an office with fluorescent overhead lights. I will go insane.
Yeah, I get that. I have like LED strips that are on either side of my main monitor, and I can have like disco mode and
Mm-hmm.
change the colors and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, for like recordings, I try to make sure it's fairly balanced so it isn't too distracting, partially for me. I just find that really interesting. And also I noticed another similarity. You were saying about hearing electricity. Now, I don't think I've heard that from someone with ADHD, so that's interesting. But I also hear it because it's not a myth. When you lose one sense, your other one's heightened. So
Yeah.
I do hear quite a bit more. And so I'll hear like fluorescent lights like humming, and like I'll hear like the spark of a switch when it's turned on, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another cool kind of similarity that you just may
Yeah.
never think about.
Yeah. And that's the other thing that I actually love about just sharing what my experience is like, because people who don't understand what it's like to have ADHD, or who are thinking maybe they do, and hearing that somebody else who does have a diagnosis that is experiencing the world in a similar way that you are, or just finding similarities, it makes it so much easier to find the language that you need in order to discuss what's going on. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a big reason why we're doing this, just so people have an opportunity to hear from people who may have a similar disability to them that they may not feel open to asking someone that they may know or just online or whatever it may be. So just sharing your insights could help others who are trying to manage ADHD and how to optimize their work life or personal life. So
mhm.
maybe there's someone watching this who thinks, oh, maybe I should try different kind of lighting situations in my office. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. That's
Yeah.
pretty interesting to think about.
There are very various things that I've tried over the years, and one of the mottos that I kind of live by is as soon as you find something that works for your ADHD, it stops working. So it's constantly trying to figure out what's going to work. So if something's working for a little bit and it stops working, well, now it's time to find another way of dealing with it. And one of the great tools that I have found specifically for ADHD, Danny Donovan, who is a content creator for specifically ADHD, she has put out the anti-ADHD planner or the anti-planner. And she's got two versions of it. There is the clean version, and then there's the spicy version, which has got plenty of curse words in it. And anybody who experiences ADHD and uses spicy language will be very appreciative of it. But it is a book full, and I mean full of various things that you can do or tools that you can use in order to help gain some sort of focus. And I mean, it's an incredible tool because it goes from anything where like you're feeling overwhelmed or you just can't focus or time blindness or task management. Like it's incredible. It's not your typical journal that everybody's like, oh, just journal and you can do it. Just make a list. Just do this. Just do that. And it's like, that's great that that works for you as a neurotypical person. And that's great that it works for you for all times. But it's not going to work for me today or tomorrow or yesterday or anytime. Like, I just know that that's not going to work. However, I'm willing to try some of these smaller bits and pieces that she's got laid out in here. And, oh, I can try this, or I can flip a coin, I can play tic tac toe. Like, she gives it kind of this dopamine boost in order to help you overcome whatever hurdle it is that you've got in front of you. And so it's nice the way that's all laid out. So as it's just a book full of tools, and it's great.
I still like that, and that'll be a
Yeah.
helpful kind of resource to share with people, especially like I'm sure we'll have that in the show notes so people can take a look at it.
Yeah.
So, were those some specific examples like the tic-tac-toe and stuff that are in that? Like, are those some
Um,
strategies that you use to manage that kind of like sensory overload, or however you would put that?
so there's a bunch of different strategies that I've seen in here, and I'm very much a person. It's like, oh, a new notebook's gonna help me tremendously, and I'm very much of the era where we still had to write all of our notes down. We didn't have computers with us in the classroom. Even through college, it was you were lucky if you had a laptop with you. You know, I still write things down. I'm very much a person who, if I am writing things down, I can't focus on anything else. So
Yeah.
I am very much appreciative of the work that's been done for recording videos and transcribing videos or transcribing those recordings so that I can actually focus on the conversation and I can have thoughts and I can have just like I can be present in the conversation without having to worry about, oh, I need to go back and like I'm gonna forget this and I need to write this down. But when I do write things down, they tend to stick with me a little bit better. But then I don't hear what's going on. And all of that to say, journal or planner, I have not written in this thing yet. I bought it. It was incredible. I've flipped through the pages. I've gone through and I don't think I've read the whole thing from cover to cover, but I've definitely like flipped through this thing and seen various tools that she's got listed. I'm like, oh, that's incredible. This is 100%. Let's do this. To the point that I actually have reached out to her and asked like if she would be interested or if I could start to build some of those tools that she has in here in Power Apps. So, like, because it would be incredible if we had some of these tools available to us and then post them out on the Power Apps tool set that's out there from the PNP community, where you can post out various samples. That's what it is. I had not heard back from her because she's pretty, significant content creator and she gets a lot of people in her DMs. So I wasn't surprised that I haven't heard from her. Like a lot of these tools would be simple enough to build in a Power App, and then you could have that available to you. So if it's a tool that works, then why not make it accessible and that you could use from your phone or you could use on your computer in order to help you get through your day? So,
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Now I'm kind of curious because I always love that creative problem solving, and especially when it comes to developing those apps. And now I'm like
mhm.
curious to find out what some of those are and see if I could whip something up.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, are there any ways that your ADHD like affects your social interactions and your social life?
Yes. Believe it or not, I am an introvert. I am an IF or INFT, I believe. Whatever the mediator is referred to as. I'm very much a person, I like my alone time. Social interactions tend to drain me, especially like conferences. I love going to conferences and I love interacting with the community and I love like helping people and participating in society in general. But I also have this hatred of the human population in that I can't stand people. Like I can stand them, but like generally speaking, there are people out there where I'm just like, "Oh my God, why? You're such a drain." But, I also believe that every person serves their purpose and every person deserves to be here because they do serve a purpose. I have a very positive outlook on the human population, even though I tend to not particularly care for the human population. We are a drain on the Earth's resources. Uh, no, but being said, doing these social things, going to events, going to conferences, it drains the hell out of me to the point where it's like I don't want anybody to talk to me for like a week. Like I just can't do anything more social for like a week after I get back from these events. But while I'm there, while I'm on stage, while I'm presenting, ADHD comes out and all of a sudden I'm like everybody thinks I'm an extrovert. That I'm just like this bubbly person that just absolutely loves everybody, that 100% like let's go. I am that is ADHD speaking. 100%. It is dopamine seeking. It is out there trying to find joy, which I do find joy. I find a lot of joy in this, but it's also very draining. And so is trying to strike a balance between all of the joy that I get. Like I will be super amped and super pumped and super excited. Like even today, earlier, I had a conversation with somebody at Microsoft that they're talking about accessibility. We only talked for 30 minutes, and I was like on cloud nine for a good hour after that. Like I get super like, yeah, just so excited. Um, but then I like, oh God, I can't. I need to breathe. I need to like touch grass. I need to escape from the population and just be to recharge my batteries. So my ADHD will go in straight overdrive and it'll allow me to be present and active in social situations because I'm seeking dopamine. And then the social interaction is done and I'm drained completely. So,
Yeah, I think that's something that isn't talked about quite enough because I know after having many conversations with people with a wide variety of disabilities, a very common theme was struggling to interact with people, especially in those conference settings. Like I know for me personally, whether it's at a conference or anywhere else, very stressful to have a conversation. I love meeting people and I love like talking about things I'm passionate about, but also in the back of my mind, I'm like, am I looking at their eyes? Am I looking too much at their eyes where it's making them uncomfortable? And wait, did I just remember what they just said? Like, there are so
yeah.
many things going on. And also, I'm like, do I even know this person? Have I met them before? Because I also do public speaking, so I have people come up and like talk to me after.
Hmm.
And I'm like, do I know them or they just want to talk to me about what I talked about? And so I get that. Those interactions can be really draining. They can be fun, especially
Hmm.
in theory, but then once they're happening, especially after, like it's just so mentally draining. And I
Yeah.
find find that like I hear that from a lot of different people. And so
Yeah.
it's another interesting way how one thing can be very similar across many different disabilities.
Yeah. And I think for me, like I said before, like I remember people's faces. I don't technically, or I don't tend to remember people's names as much, but going to events and meeting as many people as I do at these events, faces do start to blur. And then I'm like, wait, do I know this person? Don't I know this person? Do I just know them from online or have I met them in person before? And so there's a lot of times where like I'll end up inside my head instead of present in the conversation. And so it does make some social interactions a little more difficult. However, one of the things that I have tended towards over the years is just being unapologetically me. I'm going to be out there and I'm going to be bubbly and I'm going to be excitable and you're going to ask if we can go do something and I'm going to be like, yes, always, like let's do it. Let's go run. Let's do the thing. And I keep people around me too who are more grounded that are like, maybe we shouldn't be doing that. Or, oh, maybe this is the like let's come back down to earth just a little bit. But then I being surrounded by these people, I'm also able to bring these people along on a journey with me. And so a lot of the time I talk about, well, anything that we're doing is going to be an adventure. Like if I'm involved, we're going on an adventure. Don't know what it's going to be like. I don't know if it's going to be a good adventure or a bad adventure, but it's going to be an adventure. And
Hey,
so
something's gonna happen.
yeah, like somebody is going to get something out of this and it may be a lesson and not let's not do that again. Um but I tend to try to stay out of my head, or I like to stay out of my head and be present in the conversation because if I start to worry about, well, am I standing right or am I talking about the right thing or like how am I look like I can't do that because otherwise I'll spiral. And so it's just one of these things where the ADHD comes out and it's, oh, this is what we're doing right now, and this is what we're gonna do. We're not focusing on anything else. And so it'll show up in conversation where I'm just extremely bubbly and really happy and excited to be there and let's do the things. And trying to find the next dopamine rush that I can get. It expresses itself in various ways.
Nice. So, what are some things that you wish people knew when interacting with you? Like for me, it's extremely helpful, especially in larger like public areas, if
Hmm.
people introduce themselves to me, even if I've already met them, because
Hmm.
I have a hard time recognizing faces similar to like what you were saying. So
Yeah.
like having them do that can be very helpful. So are there any things that can help you in those social interactions?
I don't tend to need a lot more. Like my disability it is a disability. Like it is just out there. And so I like to introduce myself to new people and let them know, hey, I have ADHD. So if I seem extra one day and not the next, or if we're talking about something and I get really, really excitable and I start cutting you off, it's not intended to be a slight against you. And so, like, I kind of preemptively apologize, even though people are like, you don't need to apologize for who you are, just be who you are. But I like to kind of put that out there like, hey, I recognize that I do this and I apologize if I do this. And if you catch me doing this and it's bothering you, please tell me. Like, you are not going to hurt my feelings. You are not going to make me run off and cry. You're not going to shut down the conversation just by saying, hey, just checking in, just letting you know, like, I need you to slow down, or I need you to reframe, or I need you to, take a second and breathe. Like, help. I'm trying to help me help you, if you will. Like I'm trying to give the fine print up front. Like I have ADHD. You may experience this. If you do and it is an issue, then please say something. Like you're not going to send me running because you said, "Hey, you're speaking too fast," or "Hey, this isn't making sense," or like you're not going to upset me. I need to know that because what ends up happening is I don't get any feedback from people, and then I said, "Does that make sense?" Like, did I just say like there's a lot going through my head right now, and I think a lot of the times when I ask, "Does that make sense?" A lot of people are like neurotypical people are like, "Yeah, you spoke English, great. Like I'm not dumb." And it's not to say that I don't think you're able to understand. It's to say that just came out of my mind at 1,000 miles an hour. I don't know if it made sense. If you were not able to follow it, please tell me because I can go back. So, like a lot of my interactions, especially with new people, it's just like the throwing up the, "Hey, this is who I am. I'm not defined by this, but these are some of the things that you can expect when interacting with me. Here's how you can, like, if it's too much for you, tell me. Please, for the love of God, tell me." It's very freeing when you are no longer wearing the mask, if you will. Like,
Yeah.
you'll hear people, especially talk in the ADHD and ADHD and autism community about wearing a mask and why that is such a draining task. Why you can have been at work all day and it feel like you have been moving nonstop yet have accomplished nothing. And what it is you're putting on a performance the majority of the day so that you can fit in the work environment. And when you finally learn to take that mask off and just be who you are, and people around you, they deal with it or they don't, but it's not affecting who you are. Like there's compromise. Like you have to compromise in everything that you do, but you don't have to compromise in such a way that who you are is not allowed to be. And so that you have to perform all day, every day. And so the sooner that you're able to remove that mask, the more confidence that you have in talking about the disability with others, the the comfort level that you have in just allowing others to understand the language in which your disability like is personified, like it makes it easier to talk with people. It's like my first professional job straight out of college. I stayed in that job for 11 years, even though the environment in which I was working was a toxic environment. Um, and when I switched from one state agency to the next state agency, one of the very first things that I was a part of was an, a new harassment training from HR, and they were, piloting it out, and they needed people to come in and test and, see if the content made sense for the level of people that they were trying to present this information to. And it just so happened that I, raised my hand to ask a question. And I'm like, theoretically, say this is the situation. And as I'm explaining the situation in which I had just left to come to this agency from, you could see the people from HR, like the head of HR and the head of the Equal Opportunity Office, and like all of these people's faces just drop because they're like, was that here? And I was like, no, 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 God, no, 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 no. This is a different agency. You could tell, like, as soon as I told them that it was a different agency, that like every single one of them was like able to breathe again. They were like, oh my God. But I stuck in that environment for 11 years dealing with that situation because I didn't think that I had any other options because I found a place that I was comfortable, and I found a place where for the most part I was thriving, but it was also a situation I didn't have my diagnosis until the very end of that career. And so once I finally had that diagnosis, I finally had that language, and I could finally understand things that were going on, I realized this isn't conducive for me where I'm at, and I need to go somewhere else. That being said, I don't have a lot of regrets in life. Like, that's just not something that I believe in, because I believe that everything that I've done up until this point has made me into the person that I am. And if I changed something, I'm very likely not to be this person that I am. And I very much like who I am. Even though I definitely have some things that need to be worked on. I'm not perfect by any means, but everything that I have done, everything that I have experienced, the good, the bad, the ugly, has all led me to be the person that I am today. And a lot of what I've had to experience, especially from having a late diagnosis of ADHD and working in environments where people just didn't understand what it was like to work with somebody like me, it has helped me better understand the type of language to use or how to express some of what goes on with myself in a manner that other people can start to understand, and they can see, like, they can start to get a better picture of what works or what could work or what doesn't work. And so having those experiences, I don't regret them at all. Like, it's made me into the person that I am, and it's taught me lessons. Sure, it would have been great to not have to deal with that, but at the end of the day, it's made me who I am. So,
Yeah, I
yeah,
like that. That's a very healthy way to look at things because we all go through stuff, and if we just think it's made me who I am, then it can make it a lot easier to deal with those things. So that's very
yeah,
helpful for to anyone looking to
yeah,
navigate life with really any disability or really anyone at all.
yeah.
But that's a really good point to wrap up on. But before we head out, is there any piece of advice you would want to share with someone with ADHD, maybe around getting diagnosed, coping strategies, anything like that?
I think for the most part, I've talked a lot about, you know, going out there and finding the diagnosis, or if you're thinking that maybe you have it and you haven't gone out there and got it, it's really finding a community, finding a group of people that you know, it you can you feel a connection to, that they seem to be experiencing the same things that you're experiencing, or like you're starting to recognize yourself in the way that they're talking or what they're talking about, and getting that kind of information and then using that information to help guide your conversations when you do actually go out and seek a diagnosis. Because a lot of the time, like, there's nothing wrong with getting the diagnosis, there's nothing wrong with not getting the diagnosis. Two things can be true, but sometimes for some people it helps having that diagnosis, because it then opens up the doorway for them to have further conversations and understanding what they're doing or how they see and interact with the world and how the world interacts with them. So going out there and finding the language that is like, I have ADHD. It's no longer ADD or ADHD. It's ADHD is now attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and it expresses itself as, you know, the hyperactivity either inside your brain or the hyperactivity outside of your brain. And so, like, it expresses itself externally differently, but it's all ADHD. Like that, like having that language and understanding, oh, well, it's no longer ADD. Like, they haven't called it ADD since the early 90s, even though everybody has referred to it as ADD or ADHD, like, still to this day. But going out there and just interacting with others, or lurking on message boards or on Reddit threads, or just finding people that share similar traits, that they're talking about your experiences or you're seeing yourself in their experiences. It is astounding how much that can change the way that you talk about your disability, about the way that you start to understand your disability, about the way that you can even talk to a medical professional and still feel like you're being heard. Because a lot of the times, especially as a female, you talk to a medical professional, it's in your head. Here's some pills. Or, oh, it it's not that big a deal. It's your female. I'm sorry, it's not that I'm female. But also having those conversations and understanding how your physiology and your neurodiversity all work together, because as a female, they're monthly cycles, and those monthly cycles, they screw around with your medication. So understanding those things. I could talk about it forever.
Well, I mean that's all very great and wonderful, and thank you so much for joining and sharing what it's like for you, and even someone like me who's a disability advocate, always wanting to learn more. Just after our discussion, there's a lot I learned on top of what I already knew about ADHD, but it's taken it to another level. So thank you for
Yeah.
that so much, Kat. And thank you for everyone, whether you're listening and or watching. So thank you all so much, and we will see you all in the next episode of Day in the Life.
Yay, thank you.
Thank you all for joining us while we explore accessibility and disability. If you enjoyed this podcast, check out more episodes and show notes at accessiblecommunity.org/podcasts. Remember, be accessible, be inclusive.